So as we sit here right now, I just want to take one moment and I want to connect inwardly to our hearts. What I experienced today was very touching. It moved me. And so if you guys will close the doors in the back, would you mind closing the door? Just close your eyes and feel into your heart. Even put your hand on your heart for just a moment. Feel yourself in this space, in this room, connecting with all of the energy that was shared with you, all of the stories that we've heard, the inspiration. Feeling yourself present in this moment. And just breathe into that deep through the nose. And exhale out through the mouth with a and just 2 more deep breaths just like that. In through the nose. Do you believe you have the power to change, to shift the culture? We believe that we do, and we know it starts within with our own practices. And so being here together is part of that. We're fortifying ourselves, we're learning, we're growing as a community. So as you sit here and just have your hand on your heart, I want to take a moment to recognize the work that Lynne has done in the world and all the people in this room who are committed to taking a stand for something they believe in, something bigger than themselves. Whether it's around starving children or homeless or feeding people, whether it's around reducing stress, depression, suicide, the work that you do is so important. I want you to honor that in yourselves. On immigration, human rights, trafficking, social justice, the environment. What are those things that break your heart? That's your calling. So whatever it is inside of you that touches you so deeply, follow that. Do something. Take action to shift. And just a special prayer right now for those children, those starving children that Lynne talked about. They're there right now. For the homeless that are wandering around outside of this building right now, wandering in the woods, not sure where to go. This is around us here in Aspen, all over the world. So as we connect to our hearts, we have the power to change and shift the culture. And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So I want to welcome you all back into this space with a little bit more tenderness in your heart, maybe if you could even get there after hearing Lynne. I so acknowledge the work that you're doing and each of you here. You know Bob, you heard from Bob earlier, Bob Chapman, number 3 CEO in the world. Moving on toward number 1. Kip Tindell, we haven't had a chance to hear from yet. He's the founder and the chairman of the Container Store. And Raj Sisodia, Shakti Leadership, and on and on and on, co-founder of Conscious Capitalism. And of course, the magnificent Lynne Twist. We're just going to integrate some of the things that we heard today, have a conversation, and hopefully take a little time for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So I get to chair this or moderate whatever that is called, this panel. I'm so excited. So I want to start with Kip because we haven't heard from him yet, and he's beyond awesome. And I want to just ask you, Kip, here we are, Leading with Love. Your company has been the number 1 company to work for, I think, in the world several times. The Fortune, Forbes, I don't know, whoever does that, they love the Container Store. And I know you've been on that list, for as long as there has been that list. And that you do this work with your wife, Sharon, the woman you love, the woman who loves you. And I want you to share a little bit, if you would, about how, as a couple, you've created the miracle of the Container Store and how that's a part of the love that's goes throughout that beautiful company.
Wow. Wow, that's a little hard to respond to, actually. Yeah, Sharon's the president and longtime chief merchant of the Container Store. And, we're really trying to build an organization where everyone associated with the organization thrives. It's so important to conscious capitalism that it's a stakeholder model as opposed to only focusing on the shareholder. We really believe if you harmonize the benefits to all of the stakeholders, within even the shareholder does much better than if you just myopically focus on the shareholder only. And I'm a real advocate of, working with your significant other. We both really love this thing, and you know how opposites attract usually in couples. And there's some things that are opposite, but some things that are so identical about us. And I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot today thinking about that, knowing you were going to ask that question. The whole balance. I mean, 17 of our top 21 positions are women. I mean, I think, my God, it's basically a housewares store. And women actually do about still 65 to 70% of the consumer spending in the United States. I was chairman of the National Retail Federation, and one of the first things I did was get a lot of women on the board. How can you have a retail organization that was, and there's still 21 or 22 CEOs of the Fortune 500. This is different than the best place to work for thing, which is Fortune. But of the 500 largest companies in America, we're down to like 22 now that are women. So we're nowhere near parity. And I think this last 2 days has really pointed out a lot of feminism only means equality. How can anybody be against equality? We still need 2 more states to come up with the equal rights. How can you be against that? But so I think there was a balance. I learned today and yesterday there maybe was a balance between Sharon and me. Sharon is the most capable person I've ever met, and Garrett Boone and I usually are considered the founders because Sharon came 1 year afterwards. She's obviously a founder too. And you're just doing what your life's work together. So you go home at night and, we don't not talk about it. We talk about it 24/7. And it's the ultimate gift, I think, to build that dream. We don't have any kids. So that is kind of our kids. And it's very much like sharing that. But I was really taken with the relationship discussion yesterday and everything that's been said about that. And for the first time, I'm thinking that what you're talking about, that balance, is really there. And I could go on about the fact that servant leadership and conscious capitalism, men came back from World War II and they applied what they learned in the military to the new businesses that they started or the businesses that they ran. And I haven't been in the military, and it may be a great way to run a military, but it's not a very good way to run a business. And so you have a different quality of leadership at the Container Store and at so many organizations now. And I'm just a huge advocate of that. So that's a tough question to answer. I give myself a C- on that answer.
That's pretty good. Next time we'll ask Sharon. We'll get her on the panel. Bob, I know your relationship with Cynthia is precious to you, and you have a huge family, as you shared with us earlier. And she is not necessarily technically inside the company with you, but can you share about how your partnership with Cynthia has empowered you to lead with love the way that you do?
Is that a hard question for you?
We'll see if I get better than a C-.
I'm trying to get the women on the panel here,
Well, I think, as you heard me mention, while I went to business school to learn management, Cynthia and I took very seriously the stewardship of our 6 children and went out and tried to seek ways of being better parents. And what was interesting to me is in that journey together with Cynthia about learning to be a good parent, I learned how to be a good leader, because leadership and parenting is identical. So that partnership of commitment to our children created tremendous learning for us. And it allowed me to then bring that to the workplace. And, I think Cynthia is from a medical background, and she thought when we got married, really businessmen were just greedy people. And her dad was a doctor and served very humbly the people in need in our community. And when we began this journey to truly human leadership, Cynthia awakened to a whole new meaning for business. And it's allowed her to embrace with pride what we stand for. And, I was interviewed, interesting, Kip was talking, and I was thinking, I was interviewed by Washington University in Georgetown for a couple of hours. And at the end of the interview, they said, "You're the first CEO I've ever talked to that didn't talk about their product." And I said, "We've been talking about our product for the last 2 hours. It's our people. we won't go to our grave proud of the machinery we build or the container stores. We'll be proud of the lives we've touched. And so I think when you take the parenting side, the commitment to marriage, the commitment to being your best self with your partner, that you can realize that through business now, because you can be a source for good in the world, not a source for greed. Remember, the Industrial Revolution that we give a lot of credit to raising the standard of living in this country and the world was all about economic value created. And what we really need, and I hope you all embrace, is we need a human revolution about human value creation in harmony with economic value creation. So I think Cynthia's grounding in our commitment to our kids and allowed me to see everybody as somebody's precious child.
That's great. Beautiful. I'm just going to make a comment on your comment, because sometimes what breaks the relationship down, if it's too bifurcated, the man does this and the woman does that. And even though you don't work together inside of the company, it's not bifurcated. The qualities of parenting are part of the qualities of your company. And running a beautiful company, I'm sure, is empowered your entire family. I mean, I see that it has. So that it's not bifurcated and separated, it's integrated in some way, even though you don't work together the way Kip and Sharon do. Raj, I wanted to ask you I had a question about this when you and I were in the rainforest together. By the way, he did a Pachamama Alliance rainforest journey, and he used to be just a rotten, terrible, mean, terrible guy, and look at him now. So you too. Just kidding. I remember when we were in the forest, in the rainforest. The rainforest is nobody's in charge. Let's put it that way. Things live and die. Everything's food for something else. There's no waste. And the indigenous people we work with, when they walk through the forest, they feel like they're in communion with millions of souls. This tree, that cricket, this snake, these ants, millions of souls. They don't feel like they're dropped in the forest and they have to protect themselves. No, that's what we do. But they're in the company of and related to millions of souls. So there's nothing. There's competition and there's collaboration in the forest. And when we were in the forest together, I asked Raj about growth of companies getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and companies taking each other over. And sometimes when I read it in the paper, like I think AT&T just bought Warner, and Warner had bought somebody else before that. And then is it all just going to be one giant monster company? Is that good? Is that healthy? Because nature doesn't kind of do it that way. So growth and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I asked him, is that healthy? Is that good? And I want to ask you that again, because you gave me a wonderful answer.
Thank you, Lynn. Businesses are obsessed with growth. That's like the first requirement, right? If you're not growing, that means you're dying somehow. But as I see it now, as I've come to understand, there are two energies behind growth. It's like anything, there's always a double-edged thing, right? It can be a good thing or a bad thing. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? It depends on what's behind it. Why do you want to grow? So the first question to ask is, why do you want to grow? And there are two sources that really the energy comes from for growth. So one is what I call the empire building energy. And if you think back to all of the so-called greats in human history, right? Alexander the Great, Ashoka the Great, or you think about the empires, the Roman Empire, this empire. Those empires grew because there was at the center of it the ego of a leader and an insatiable hunger for power and influence. And how do they grow? They grew through conquest. You do not grow by embracing, you grow by conquering other people. So enormous suffering, tens if not hundreds of millions of people dying to serve the ego of that one leader. And then you have this empire. And then eventually that emperor, the so-called great, dies and the whole thing falls apart, leaving behind only a legacy of incredible suffering. Nothing really good coming out of that. So if you think about the world of business, there are lots of businesses that grow continually because the same driver, the dynamic is the same. It's power and money. We want more and more power and money, and therefore want to continue to grow. Now that can happen in a way that's positive, or that can happen in a way that's negative. But because it's coming from that ego-based power, typically it's negative, which means a lot of people are going to have to suffer. When 3G Capital out of Brazil attacked Unilever, John was talking about the activist investors. And that's completely empire building, ego based power. They want to create short term returns for themselves. 3G Capital would have acquired Unilever and completely destroyed that company. It's the world's most sustainable company. That's their vision. I mean, they touch 2 billion lives a day. They're making a huge difference. So the more those kinds of companies grow, the worse the world gets. Because every merger means 30% of people are going to get laid off. 3G Capital acquired Kraft Foods when I was working with them. And all the work we are doing to make Kraft conscious was thrown out the window. The CEO and his entire leadership team were fired. And the CEO had stood firm against this merger. He told the board, over my dead body. He said, we need to reinvent this company and make it conscious for the next 100 years, make it relevant. His own kids told him, we don't buy any of your products anymore. It's not relevant to today. But the board eventually ended up doing that. And Tony Vernon would have made $40 million if he said yes. But he said no, much to his credit. And he got a standing ovation. But next week he was fired with his entire leadership team. The 3G Capital CEO comes in, a young Brazilian. 3G Capital is out of Brazil. And he assembles 400 of the top leaders. And he says, this year our earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and the EBITDA as it's called, was 17%. That's not acceptable. Next year we want 26% out of this company. So how many of you think that's possible? Raise your hand. Now, people weren't expecting this question. Oh, some people are raising their hands. No, he asked for it. So, and they said, how do you go from 17 to 26 in 1 year? That's almost impossible, right? Unless you fire half your people or do crazy stuff like that. So most people did not raise their hand. About half the people kind of half raised their hands. And he said, everybody who didn't raise their hand, go to the next room. HR is waiting with your termination papers. We only want high performers around here. Okay? And the rest of the people, you think the people who were left in the room were happy? No, this is a reign of terror, right? This is what happens. The empire building energy, there's a human cost. What I was talking about earlier in my talk, right? It never gets factored in. So the world gets worse the more those companies grow. Now, I got to spend a lot of time with Bob, and we actually went on a trip with him to Europe for 8 or 9 days with 2 of his sons, and we saw, 14 companies in 9 countries in 12 cities in those 9 whatever days, right? I mean, this man gets up at 5 and then he goes to bed at 11, and he's relentlessly moving all through the thing, companies that we're looking to buy, companies we already bought, etc., etc. And then we wrote the book. And then I was with him a few months ago and in Wisconsin, and we had taken a group of CEOs to visit their plant there and learn about this stuff. And I asked him, how's everything going? He said, we're on track to acquire 10 to 15 more companies this year. And I said, well, we've acquired 105 of these things already. Why do you need to acquire so many more? Right? I mean, you don't need the money. You don't need the aggravation. You've got 26 grandchildren. And I said, when the number of companies exceeds the number of grandchildren, then maybe it's too many. I kind of knew the answer because I got to know Bob over the course of writing the book. And he says, I don't know how much time I have left. And in that time, on my deathbed, I will not be proud of the machines we built or the money I made. I'll be proud of the lives we touched, as he said. And I said, Bob, you're not growing a business, you're spreading a ministry. This is a healing business. And when you have a healing business, you, I believe, have an obligation to grow. And that's what Bob is operating under. He feels he has an obligation to grow. There are people in small towns in Wisconsin and Ohio and all over this country and all over Europe now that are waiting for Bob, because they know their lives will get better. They will have a future, and their children will have a future. The mayor of Phillips, Wisconsin pointed to Bob, and that man saved our town. Because 650 people work at PCMC, and the town's population is 1,400. And a third of the manufacturing had already been sent. A third of the manufacturing had already been sent to Brazil. And they had lost hope. And they said, one of the guys I'll never forget said, when people knew we were dying, what happens when you're dying with the vultures circle, right? When an animal is dying, the vultures know. So a bunch of companies were circling us like vultures, seeing what can they get out of us. There's land, there's equipment, the people are, they'll be dismissed. And they said Bob was circling us. He was like a guardian angel. And he's trying to see, is there any way I can give this town and these people a future? And he did, and he's done that 105 times, and by the end of this year, 120 times, right? So the more he grows, and I think, as I said, if you have a healing organization, you cannot rest on your laurels. It's later than we realize. There's an urgency. The suffering is out there. There are people waiting. And if not business, who's going to do that? No nonprofit can really solve these problems. Governments can't. It ultimately is business. And if business leaders like Bob and others who we hope to inspire. So in the Healing Organization, we have 25 stories of companies that are doing this kind of work. The more they grow, the better the world gets. And people have futures and multi-generations of family. One illiterate woman in Jaipur who works for Jaipur Rugs, who was part of the untouchable weaver class, who was not even educated because she's a girl in an untouchable family. You can't get any lower than that in India or anywhere in the world. And then she gets married off at 14, and then she has to have children, and her in-laws make her do all the work, and her husband is alcoholic. And she has to do all that and weave carpets on the side to bring in money. And her life was beyond hellish. And then Jaipur Rugs and N.K. Chaudhary, who's called the Gandhi of the carpet industry, comes along. And his whole thing is, he said, these are the innocents. And my job is to protect and serve the innocents of the world. These women have never done anything to anybody other than serve them. And their lives are hell. So he came out, created Jaipur Rugs, basically to uplift their lives. 3 or 4 times what they're getting paid before. Foundation that has educated them, given them all this opportunity for growth. She has 6 children now. 2 have graduated college, 2 are in college, and 2 are in school. 6 children of an illiterate woman are going to complete college because this business found her, or she found this business.
Wow.
So that's the power of business to heal. And there are 40,000 Shantis in that company and growing. So that's the power of business. And I think that's where, we should be obsessed about growth for the right reasons. We need to grow if we have something that's bringing healing in the world. Otherwise, it's a cancer. Cancer is a form of growth. We don't need cancer.
The best way to change the world, I believe we all think the best way to change the world for the better is to change the world of business. And I think Bob's a great example of somebody who has some evidence that he can make a difference. And I think every one of us in the room can really make a difference. And, the metamorphosis that takes place when Bob buys a business and the employees have been beaten down and they're kind of at their lowest point on Maslow's hierarchy, and their self-esteem is the lowest. They turn into butterflies. I mean, literally. And they treat the golden retriever better. They treat the guy at the 7-Eleven better on the way home, and they find out that they can succeed being themselves and that type of thing. That's the most glorious thing I think I've experienced in business, and I know that you've experienced in business. And so you can change the world one employee at a time who actually looks forward to getting out of bed and going to work in the morning now. And one employee at a time, one company at a time makes a huge difference.
Can I ask you, Kip, to talk about the Container Store and the growth of the Container Store? And I know with Bob's, I'm going to ask you this, Bob, too, and then we'll open it up. But acquiring companies, and have you acquired, I don't know enough about your business to know about acquisition in your case, but when you acquire to have, we hear about companies that get acquired, huge layoffs, people lose their job, and everything is cut costs, increase profits. In acquisition, the world of acquisition, how has that been for you in the Container Store and the growth that we're talking about here?
Well, we only did one acquisition, Alpha, that system that organizes your closet. We bought that. It's a Swedish company, actually. And it was kind of a David and Goliath thing. We were up against some very large companies that wanted to buy it in an auction, and the owner was selling it. And we really didn't have the money to buy it, but the employees demanded that the Container Store, we were their biggest customer, be the one to buy it. So that formed this great vertical integration, and it's been, very successful. The way we've grown is simply by opening stores. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, after we started in 1978 as well, after 40 years, we still have a compounded annual growth rate of just over 20%. And we're not growing at 20% anymore, but I mean, it was so, that's still the average. So, growth, you don't hear that question that you asked about why are you growing at a quarterly call, but growth can be done in a manner that is one more moment on the Sweden thing. So we have a factory in Västervik, Sweden, highest labor costs in the world. And if we have a 12% growth that year, I take 6% of it and actually do robotics and that type of thing because it's the highest labor cost in the world and we have to maintain competitiveness. And the other 6% we do just in terms of more Vestervik employees, this sleepy little fishing village that loves us. And just through doing that, just through doing half of the growth through efficiency gain and half of it to the employees, more benefits for them, more employees for them. They call me Cesar Chavez, which is so hysterical because I'm just being very pragmatic about it. I mean, half of it is efficiency gain, and then half of it is more human way of doing it. But they're so used to American companies, moving it to some Eastern European country or that type of thing. So growth can be, as everyone in the room knows, growth can be done in a very profitable and very human way, a very conscious capitalist way.
Great. Bob, do you want to comment on this since you're kind of a
Well, I think
super
this
expert?
story that probably resonates the most for me because I feel like every time we adopt a company, where it's kind of like opening the church in a new community. And I always tell our people we can do more good for a community than the nonprofits and the churches in that community if we just send our people home feeling valued. But to share with you, we recently acquired a company in France, in Brittany, France, and in France there's tremendous amount of government laws that protect workers from the greed of management. And so we accepted that. And but the Workers' Council which represents all the employees, has to approve the sale, which I think is very thoughtful. Our board was very much against us being in France because of all the government rules. So I fly over to France because we had an agreement to buy a French company from a prominent French company. Here I am, an ugly American, flying over to this beautiful country to hear what the Workers' Council says. So I sit in this room, and there's 6 men and women in their 50s and 60s sitting across from me. And they said, Mr. Chapman, it's the Workers' Council elected by the team members. And they said, Mr. Chapman, we went up to Paris where you have a plant. We sat down with the Workers' Councils. We talked to them about how you treated them. We like what they said. We studied your values. We like what you said, and we want you to buy our company. Now, as an American,
Wow.
I felt a tremendous sense of pride that French people wanted to be acquired by an ugly American.
That's where the term provincial started, So
But what's interesting is following the chairman's statement about him wanting us to acquire a company, a gentleman sitting next to the chairman, again, picture yourself sitting there where I was. A gentleman sitting next to the chairman said, Mr. Chapman, could I say something? I said, sure. He said, Mr. Chapman, we've been waiting for you for 32 years. And they began crying because governments can't protect your soul. They can protect your job, but they can't protect your soul. And these men and women were hurting just like everybody else because nobody cared about them. So that was a profound moment for me because we talk about the hurt in the world. And when you see people making good salaries and good jobs, but they don't feel valued, that's what we need to solve, because then we'd be more caring to each other. We'd have better marriages and better families. So that experience in France was a profound experience for me.
Fantastic. Well, yeah. I'd like to open it up to all of you. This is a rare opportunity to talk to 3 really remarkable leaders who are leading with love, obviously. 4. Okay, me too. Oh, I'm the moderator. You can ask me too. And look and see if you'd like to have a question for them, or if you have a comment. Comments are okay, as long as you don't take the floor and make this whole thing about you. And you know about how some people do that when they get to the microphone. Something happens to them. The microphone starts to envelop them, and they think that it's time for them to share their entire life philosophy. Not that. But comments are okay too. So let's see. Do we have microphones out there or no? Oh, we do. Okay. So raise your hand. And here's the thing. I learned this. I'm going to tell you this little story here. When you share, I'd like you to stand up, because people speak louder when they stand up, and then we can see who's talking. It's not a disembodied voice. But also, I was leading a seminar about this size in New York City once, and there was this guy in the back row who was one of those curmudgeon kind of people. And, when I'd pair people up to do a little process, he wouldn't move, and we'd need an extra person for the pair of it. He wouldn't move. And he was frowning the whole time, and he didn't share. And I you know how when you're a speaker, sometimes you have a lot of attention on a person like that. You're trying to ignore them, but you can't. You want them to just nod a little teeny bit or something. So at one point in this, it was a workshop. He raised his hand, and I thought, oh shoot. So I called on him, and he stood up and he said, "You people out here, stand up so we can see you. Speak loud when you share so we can hear you. And then sit down so we can like you." So that's my little recommendation for this section. Okay, who would like to share? Right here in the front, and then we'll take you in the back. Do we have more than one mic? Went in the back here, and then the third person will be there. Oh, can you keep your hand up so he can find you? And second person there, and third person there. Okay, go ahead.
My name's Ken, and my question for Bob or any of the panelists would be, if somebody had the shared values of conscious capitalism and wanted to run their business or company with the same values and manner in which you do, how would you best suggest they acquire the skills and tools that you've developed over all these years in order to elevate your staff in this very meaningful manner?
There's a turquoise-looking book over there.
And a yellow one behind.
Was this a planted question or what? I don't know. No, but seriously, Conscious Capitalism Field Guide, to answer exactly that question people have been asking us. And they come to our events and you learn from each other, etc. But this is a systematic, step-by-step guide to the journey. And tomorrow morning, there's a 2-hour workshop on that. So, yeah.
Great question.
And
Thank you.
I would say that you can go to the YouTube and look up my TED Talk. You could sit down with your leadership team and say, share that message, which I shared, and say, is this something you all believe? Because I think you need to want to do this. I think your team needs to want to do this. And then, our book, we wrote the book because somebody said, you've got to share this with the world. And it's really a how we got there and then how to do it. So I would say to you, it's kind of out there, and it just begins with we want to care about our people.
And, actually, Raj and I are, I think today or tomorrow, we're the new co-chairs of Conscious Capitalism. And one of the main things we're trying to do is make sure everybody has an easier time achieving the answer to your question. So I promise to work towards that.
Excellent question. Okay. So the second person is in the back there. The gentleman, can you stand up? Oh, it's Lee.
Oh. Was it me?
Who had their hand up that I called on?
It was
you.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
me.
I can't see that well. That's
Sorry.
lights.
Yeah. So
Excuse me. A
is this on?
beautiful, young, delicious woman.
What's
Go
that?
ahead.
On our website,
Lower.
we love some adoption.
Okay. Okay. So hi. So my
You
name
can hold the microphone like it's an ice cream
higher.
cone. And
Can you hear me
and
now?
We'll, pick you up.
better. There we go. Got it. Okay. So my name is Kellen, and thank you so much for sharing. And I'm really grateful for the evolution that we're going through in our society and that we're all doing together. My question, is in response to the fact that we're here weaving together capitalism, evolution, love, consciousness, these concepts. And to me, we're also talking about growth. And to me, any conscious being, really any being of any sort, goes through death. And, we're also familiar with growth and growth and growth and growth. And there's an ongoing conversation about growth. And I'm just wondering, for all of you as conscious capitalist leaders, how do you factor death into conscious capitalism?
Thank you for that question.
Professor?
I'm not sure. Do you mean death of a business or death of us? Death of human beings.
To me, it's all connected, and if we don't acknowledge it and learn how to let things die in our culture gracefully, and hospice that.
Okay.
I mean, how can we do that?
So I would turn to Lynne actually, because for her wisdom on that kind of, it is certainly the graceful exit, right, is important to make space for the new. I don't know if you want to add to what you said earlier about hospice.
Well, thank you for that question. I think I would say, if you look at the context of your question, I would say that the death of ways of doing business that are hurtful, that damage people, that don't respect them, that are all about profit and not about the health and well-being of the people. That's what's dying, and we want it to die, and we can hospice its natural death. Bob wasn't always like this. I mean, he used to run companies to make money. You know, he didn't tell you that part, but he did. and
Did he go to the rainforest too?
he not yet. We try to get him to the rainforest, but he actually doesn't need it anymore, I think. But I think, you know, people who go to business school and people who are in the kind of status quo are taught, as was said earlier, to do business a particular way. Even business schools now are not teaching that anymore, because this wonderful way of working and doing business is really the new way. And these amazing people are midwifing it. At the same time, they are hospicing the death of the old ways. If you listen to what all three of them said, actually, Kip didn't speak but even in the way he's speaking on the panel. So I think it is important to recognize, as Raj did when he talked about how powerful business is, and John Mackey, if you remember, how he talked about how powerfully business has built a better life for billions and billions and billions of people. We don't want to kill that, but we want to allow the way of working that was at the expense of so many people to die away and to hospice its natural death. So that's what I'd say, but there may be other answers here.
I would just make one slight edit to what you said. I think business schools actually are not teaching the new way.
Well, you are.
I am, but I'm an elective. You know, they come to my course, they already are kind of unhappy with the old story and it's an elective. But if you look at the core curriculum of business, it's still rooted in profit maximization, shareholder value. It's finance dominated. It's all about management and strategy, but it's nothing about culture, about leadership, about people, about purpose. Those words are absent.
Mm.
So I think business schools are actually the biggest barrier to positive change right now. And it's a huge problem, actually. I'm trying to work with it.
I would agree with that completely. I always say in our Leadership Institute, we're treating cancer, but we're not curing cancer. The cure for cancer is we got to start teaching people in our education system to create leaders who have a profound sense of responsibility for the people they're going to get to lead. The good news is on December 11th, the chair of Harvard's MBA program is bringing 6 to 9 professors out to experience our culture because they're rethinking the way they teach leadership.
And I think the biggest thing that business schools need to do is to teach kids coming out of business school that business, and certainly life, is not a zero-sum game. I mean, somebody doesn't have to lose in order for you to win. And that's a pretty good summation, I think, of conscious capitalism. It's synergies. Creating synergies are what's most intellectually stimulating and fun and profitable in business. And so the individuals and the companies that are creating synergies are gaining market share. You know, I don't know, Southwest Airlines versus American Airlines, even though you're working on them. And, you know, Costco versus Sam's Wholesale, you know, those companies are actually, and the companies that are holding on to that old way of doing things are actually reducing in market share. And the most wonderful thing you can do is to create a sustaining, long-term, synergistic relationship with an employee, with a supplier, with anything. And it's not enough to just do a win-win relationship, because you can form a win-win relationship with a tobacco company where you both, you know, treat each other really well and you both make a lot of money. It has to be a win-win-win thing, because in the tobacco relationship between you and the, you know, society's paying the real cost of goods sold on the tobacco byproduct, you know, problems. And so the most joyful and the most profitable and the longest lasting business relationships and the most profitable ones are those win-win-win synergistic relationships. And I'm just so encouraged. When we started doing this, 12 years ago, there was so much skepticism about conscious capitalism and this whole thing. And now that skepticism is really, really vanishing. I mean, it's still there, but it's mostly, you see it mostly by the least sophisticated business people you talk to, and the people that sort of intuitively, if nothing else, know there's something to that, are the ones that are the most sophisticated. So, and one final thing on that whole note, don't you think eventually a good capitalist is going to adopt that methodology which is most successful? Mm-hmm. So maybe we can save our breath. They're all going to come to it anyway.
Yes, I would. However, I mean, people do come to us through that door, right? They look at chapter 6 first. conscious companies outperformed over a 10-year period, like 9-1. And some research that I had done, right? And there's many other. And I said, okay, this seems like a better way to do in business because it allows us to make more money. I said, well, if that's the reason, if that's the only reason you want to do this, it probably will not work. My friend Fred Kaufman has a new book out, and he uses this analogy. He says, imagine you're proposing marriage to somebody. And you get down on your knees and say, would you marry me? And she says, why do you want to marry me? And you say, well, I read that married people live about 5 years longer, and they earn about 30% more in the course of their life. So CEOs will say, I heard happy people are more productive. Okay, let's get some happiness here, right? No, these things are inherently important, right? You have to do the right things for the right reasons. These are not means to another end. These are the end. The end is human flourishing, and that includes everybody, right? And it's a happy, byproduct that then leads. It's one of Adam Smith said, freedom leads to prosperity. It's a beautiful historic, fact that he discovered. These are two things we want, and they're connected. Same thing with our movement. Building a build on love leads to companies making more money. But if you do it for making money, it won't happen. Even your love will be questioned.
I want to add that we're talking about business, we're talking about the issues of business. I speak in the military, government, education, and healthcare, and it is prevalent in every facet of our society. We were given an opportunity to take this idea to a hospital, a very well-run hospital. We shared our message with the trustees, the board members, and the leaders of the hospital. And at the end of it, the doctors and the nurses cried because they said, nobody cares about us. I spoke to the Iowa Teachers Association. 71% of all teachers are disengaged because superintendents and school boards don't know how to care for the teachers. So this is not just a business issue. It's in every facet of our society. We are not creating leaders. We are creating managers and manipulators. And our education system has got to embrace their role, so we start teaching people how to care for each other.
Thank you, Bob.
Wow, I like that.
So we have lots more people who have questions, and you're the next person.
Yep. Hi, my name is Allison. I want to thank you all very much for the work that you're doing. When you hear the story about Kraft, it just kind of breaks your heart. And then you hear stories on the flip side of companies like Costco, who in the face of rising healthcare costs decided not to push that all to their employees because they cared about their employees and how even the short run that turned out to be a positive thing. I love the message that you're saying about caring. And I also hear about, both Bob and Kip speaking about their obligations to the board. And when you make a comment around Fortune 500 companies and you still only have 22 of them that are feminine, and obviously the Kraft story is an example of sort of that male energy, that warrior energy. And the story of caring is typically that feminine energy that we've been talking about these last couple of days. How do we make that shift when there are so few women leaders at a senior level and very few women board members? And how do we get there? And I'm just wondering, Bob, if you have a little bit more flexibility, being that you are CEO of a private company versus Kip being CEO of a public company. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can take a stab at that before I turn. Yeah, it certainly is a big challenge. In the recent past, we're actually going backwards because we were at 26 women running Fortune 500. We're down to 21 or 22. Board members, I think the last time I saw about 19%. So that's the data. Now, on the other side, so women outnumber men in college across the board in every discipline. It's close to 60% now are women in the US and actually across all industrialized nations. Women outnumber men in every part of the world except South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa in college. And what that means is fundamentally every white-collar profession, everything that requires a college degree is going to be numerically dominated by women. And law schools, medical schools, all kinds of schools have way more women than men. Business schools have been the laggards. So Babson, we admitted our first female majority class last year. And I think that's going to continue, right? But before that, I think top business schools are 35 to 40% women. And many of those women then leave because they find the world of business to be hostile to families. And they make a tough choice to back away. And they become the positive side effect of that is rising entrepreneurship by women. right? Who are checking out of the corporate world and starting their own things. So I think we have to address this, and the evidence, again, as I showed you some of the charts, feminine qualities, how they're related to leadership, etc. There's a great organization called Catalyst. They have a website called catalyst.org, and they collect all the research on this that shows what happens when you have more women board members, when you have more women in leadership generally, and the dramatic impact on just about everything you want to measure, whether it's stock price, whether it's growth, whether it's sustainability, employee happiness, engagement, everything improves when you have, and it needs to be at least 3 women on a board. Because if you have one token woman, she's not going to be able to do anything. Even when you have 3 or more, it dramatically changes the conversation. It changes the complexion of the whole experience, and new things get surfaced, right? So again, I hate to bring everything down to self-interest. It's a form of enlightened self-interest as well. Companies need to recognize that this is the path to survival in the world, in the future. But again, I want people to do the right things for the right reasons. Don't just do it. It's not just to achieve a certain goal. So it's a challenge. We all understand it, but I think the long-term demographics are going to push in that direction, and I think the pragmatic realization is also going to push us in that direction.
It's a big challenge, and one of the reasons why, and I apologize for the generalizations, but when you talk about this topic, so at the Container Store, one of our foundation principles is communication is leadership. That's what leadership is communication. Well, guess who tends to communicate better, right? And so I really think that women make better business leaders than men. You have scientific evidence, good data evidence that they make better investors. You hear that, Tom Gardner? But there's other things, and so people in positions like all of you, starting businesses, women start becoming entrepreneurs. If the position, the CEO of Apple, is open, and there's 10 qualifications for it, a woman thinks she has to have all 10 of those qualifications to take the job, and a man thinks he only needs 2 of them. And there's something to that, and that's part of what's changing a little bit. And so you have to build an organization where most of the upward mobility is women, creating, and then that there needs to be lots of companies. We did that. It can absolutely be done. They make better business executives anyway, so create businesses where most of the leadership is women, and promote women not over men, but just because that naturally is the focus. And pay attention to what I say about that. Men think ideally you need 6 or 7 of those 10 to take that job, but women don't really need to. Yeah, so there you go.
Yes, thank you. Bob, do you want to answer that?
The only thing I'd add is, even though we're a privately held company, we have to create value. And so we have the same challenge. We have a longer term perspective than I think public companies do. But again, I speak in so many different facets, like education, where there's many women involved in education. And again, they don't have any different training. They have different basic, I said earlier, it's our source of goodness. But, women who make it to the top seem to be just as tough as the men. Okay, because if you don't produce short-term results in the public market, I happen to have firsthand experience with 3G Capital, which bought Anheuser-Busch. They bought Kraft, they bought Heinz, they bought Burger King, and it's brutality. And some notable, famous investors invested in, because we live in a society where I want it and I want it now. And so in many ways, we as business leaders, now I'm in the private sector, but Kip's in the public. Basically, our shareholders don't really care what Kip did for the last 25 years. They want to know what he's going to do tomorrow. And he's got a lot of young investment advisors. So there's tremendous pressure on performance because people want it and they want it now. And so, until we shift that to people see the value of organizations. So to me, the women I've met in my journey are just as tough as the men. If they don't produce results, they're out of the job just like the men. So we need longer term investors. We need people investing in just companies, as Kip's now involved in. We need people to say, I care. Remember that gentleman at the Aspen Institute said, while we do good in the world, could we do less harm? And how did you get your money? We have a society where we celebrate people who write checks to charity, but we don't ask them how they got their money. The greatest act of charity for a leader is the way he takes care of his people, not the checks he writes.
Great. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Well, there's a lot of people who want to ask a lot of questions. So let's go all the way to the back. The woman who has her hand up right there in the aisle. Do you want to stand up and they'll be able to find you? And then the next one here. Yeah, the next one here. So where the microphone guy is. And then the third there. We'll see if we can do 3 more. We have 10 minutes. So don't have your question be too long. Okay. Keep talking and put it right next to you like a ice cream cone, and eventually it'll start picking you up. Just start talking.
What? There we go.
There we go.
My name is Gwen, and I haven't heard this mentioned. And with the IPCC report that came out, and we know we have now 10 years or maybe less to avert what they're calling very clearly global catastrophe. I'm just kind of wondering what that means for the practice of business, as well as the flourishing of people. It's not possible without the flourishing of the planet. And I know that that means a real change for business fundamentally. And I don't know what that looks like. And I wonder what you all are thinking about that.
Thank you. Good question. Yeah, okay. I'll just say I want to make sure that all of you know about drawdown. How many people have heard about drawdown? Paul Hawkins' research. Paul Hawkins is a great ecologist, a business guy, an author, environmentalist. And he's done the last 6-7 years with 282 experts. What are the top 100 solutions to reversing global warming? Not mitigating it, not holding it back, not slowing it down, because that's been at the effect of it. But we created it, and we can reverse it. And the book is absolutely critical, I think, to our time. It's a revelation. So it is possible to reverse global warming according to that study. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that, because that means, without at the risk of saying too much about this, it's not game over, it's game on. It's game on. And Paul says that global warming is not happening to us, perhaps. Maybe it's happening for us, No one can escape it. We created it. It's the perfect feedback from the mother, perfect feedback from our mother, waking us up to behave. So that's one way of answering your question. And I know these gentlemen have a lot to say about that.
I think that's to me, that book is 80 proven solutions that work today and 20 that are just around the corner, each one with massive economic opportunity attached, right? Where solar and wind power are already, in fact, cheaper than oil and coal, certainly. So all of these answers are out there, and we can move rapidly in that direction because the economic case already exists to do so. In the human case, the planetary case is taking on tremendous urgency, as we know.
It's sadly too uniquely American, the refusal to do much in business. There's thriving companies in Copenhagen and everywhere else that's, addressing this is just a part of their doing business. So I think, Exxon just got sued over it. Did you see that? And so hopefully the U.S. will get with it a little better. But the U.S. is only a part of it. The rest of the advanced world is doing a better job incorporating that into what they're doing in business.
I guess I would say that there's a lot of wonderful causes, including our Earth, that we need to be incredibly sensitive to. But my feeling is when people don't feel cared for, they don't care for other initiatives. And so my goal is to create a more caring world, so we care for each other. And in caring for each other, we care for the world as we care for each other.
Beautiful. You take care of that which you love, really. And love is the core of everything there. So thank you. Wonderful question. A lot more we could say about that. Okay, the next person I called on is somewhere.
Dad.
Oh, Dad. Gina's dad. Okay. Let's hear from Gina's dad.
Okay, I don't want to be Gina's dad right now. I just want to be John. Because Gina's dad denotes something different than, she's done a wonderful job and I'm very proud of her. But I have a statement and I have a question. And for me, that's pretty good. Just two things, right? The statement first is that you're speaking to the choir. How do we get more men here who are in charge, who are making a lot of the rules to come to something like this? Because to speed this thing up, if you're just going to wait for the women to grow into this thing, it's going to take a hell of a long time. But if we have more men like Bob and Kip.
Whoa.
Wait a minute. This is my mic. She cannot.
Do you want to just duke this out right now?
No, I have gone to several things of Gina's, the yoga things, and 90%, 95% of are women who care about their bodies. They care about the world. They care about their families and how they survive. And we need to bring more men into that. And I think you touched on it, Raj. We cannot diminish men as we raise women. Otherwise, we're in trouble. So, question. Does conscientious capitalism, try to say that fast 5 times. Conscious capitalism include a fair living wage, mandatory vacation time, health insurance, parental leave for both men and women? I thought I had 5, but I'm getting old. Thank you. So could you speak to that? And to me, that's going to be a real difficult part to gain the major corporations who are looking for only profit to make that a part of their business plan.
Thank you, John.
The first day I was chairman of the National Retail Federation, we represent 1 in 4 American workers and all that. And I was interviewed and I said, this was off the record actually over dinner with the reporter. And I said, one of the things I hope to do as NRF chair is moderate the NRF's position on minimum wage because it's currently to the right of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And that was off the record. And then it got published. And then the next day I got an email from the CEO of McDonald's and the CEO of Walmart. And all it said was WTF, question mark. So, anyway.
We got about 2 minutes left here.
Well, conscious companies generally treat their frontline people, it's kind of a military term, I want to use that, but that's what we have. They pay their people better and they provide better benefits, and you can look at all these companies that we have, they're way beyond what the normal is. So I think that's there, and I have another point which I can use, so I'll turn to Bob. I'm like...
What happens when we hurry?
I would say to you, my perspective on that is, we tend to hire higher skilled people, so we don't really have many people, below the, I can't even imagine we have anybody below the minimum wage. But I would say to you that in my lifetime, I've seen tremendous pressure on our American corporations, retail industry, to deliver lower prices, okay? And the American consumer has rewarded those companies that find lower prices. And so in my lifetime, the brown shoe companies and the little factories in the small towns, the Motorola factories, we've lost a lot of the middle class in America who were paid good pay in small towns because we, the consumer, said we want better value. And we really don't care how you get it. The American consumer votes with their dollars, and American retailers have to respond to it. I mean, I always say if you walk in a store and there's a bottle of shampoo, and this bottle of shampoo says made by a gentleman in Toledo making $20 an hour who sends his kids to public schools, and here's a bottle made in China for half the price, where they paid somebody 50 cents an hour, which one are you going to buy? Would the American consumer vote for the higher price so we can pay people fairly? So in my lifetime, I've seen us lose many, 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 many good paying jobs in this country. Many small towns losing their heart and soul because jobs were moved overseas because the American consumer says, I want more and I want it for less.
Paying people well does not reduce your competitiveness. Costco pays almost twice what Sam's Wholesale does, and they're kicking their butt. Sam's Wholesale's closing stores. Costco's got like 11-12% comp store sales increases. Walmart's saying those increases at the bottom have not hurt them. They've actually been good. So it's a false assumption that reduces your competitiveness, and I think American business is figuring that out finally.
Yeah, so Costco pays their people double, but their sales per employee are 3 times higher.
Wow.
Right? And he gets criticized all the time. He said, I want my people to be able to look after their family.
Jim Sisodia pioneered that. We pay 2 times industry average, and people say, how can you do that? And I say, talk to Jim Sisodia. He's the guy that taught us that it was good to do that.
So I would say that, there's minimum wage, there's fair wage, there's living wage, but there's something we call a prosperity wage. Now, it's one thing to be just able to survive, that's kind of a living wage, right? We need to aim higher than that. And you can create a business model that says, here's what's essential and non-negotiable. And now we figured out, as John said, human creativity is unlimited. We can figure out a business model that makes it work. When your employee turnover, Costco's employee turnover is 7%, Walmart's is 70%. Walmart has to hire 2 million people at a cost of $5,000 each to hire them, right? To replace those who voluntarily left. And then they're not that efficient or effective because they just got there, right? So there's huge savings on the other side. There's a company called HEB, the grocery chain in San Antonio, which is the most beloved grocery chain in Texas and in Mexico, actually. They have some of the lowest prices in their industry, and they pay their employees the best. Their chairman, Charles Butt, whose grandmother started this company, and his orders to the CEO, please pay our people as much as possible, not as little as possible. Right? So if you have that as your intention, you can then figure out how to create a business model that actually is successful and creative, right? Using your creativity. And that's what all these companies that we're talking about have done. So it is, again, a reflection of zero-sum thinking to say that you can only get good wages with higher prices, or you can only get low prices for customers if you do this. Right? It is a way to do all that. And the other side of it is educating customers. That what you're voting with your dollars, and you're then perpetuating certain things. So having more conscious customers so that they do educate. There are about 60-70 million Americans who are part of that segment, I would say, today, who already do make some of those choices in favor of products that have been sourced in a certain way and people have been treated certain way. Of course, there are many others who are not there yet, but I think we're moving in that direction as well.
Well, I called on a third person, and I'm going to ask you to appreciate these guys, because we're going to end with appreciation, what we learned today. And why don't you go ahead and do that, and then I'll follow up after that.
That's perfect. Thank you, guys. I think on behalf of every single person in this room, we realize that you took time out of your real life, leading with love, to be here to teach us and to guide us and to support us as we aim to do the same thing. And I think on behalf of all of us, we express sincere, heartfelt gratitude that you would come into this place to be present with us. Thank you.
Beautiful. Let's stand up and give these guys a hand. Thank you so much for being part of this day. Tyler, Angie, you're still here. Come on up on stage. I want to just leave you with one action step that you can take. And thanks to the guys in the back, we have an area on our website where you can sign up and become part of this local chapter, because we're into moving this thing forward here locally, that's for sure. And thank you all for inspiring us. Let's do group hugging.
Yeah. Everybody out there, you hug too.
Yeah, we hug too. Let's do it. Come on, grab on